So, Stephen and I, and in our weekly show prep, online chat.
It's because we actually have stuff to do, so we can't meet each other.
We're both at work. Yes. We're time thieves.
Donate to SYN boldly.
Donate to SYN boldly, and that won't be a problem anymore. Raised this idea of talking about the language we use for the people we disagree with. Mm-hmm. And the term that we specifically brought up, we've talked about a different term here tonight. We talked about homophobic. We talked about the term anti-gay.
Yes, because one of the things in the article that I read in the Emory Will, which is Emory's, student newspaper.
Oh, those lovely undergraduates.
Ooh, they bumped up the paper quality from when I was an undergrad. Anyway, go on.
Yes,
it's super fancy looking.
That's that Coke money. When you have a $7 billion endowment, you can do stuff like that.
Anyways.
Anywho, Bishop Eddie Fox.
Dr. Eddie Fox.
Dr. Eddie Fox.
Or Reverend Dr. Eddie Fox.
Reverend Dr. Eddie Fox stated that he didn't agree with what he was being called, which was anti-gay. And my question that kind of ties everything into it is how often do we, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, how often do we lump someone in with this one thing, and then we can no longer see them as something else? So Bishop Eddie Fox is Bishop Eddie Fox.
Doctor, the Reverend Doctor.
Reverend
Doctor
Eddie Fox.
Eddie Fox. There's a Bishop Eddie Long.
God
here in
willing
Atlanta.
that he not be bishop.
I
just said that.
Reverend Dr. Eddie Fox
that's on the record.
is stated as being anti-gay. People are calling him anti-gay, but he's also pro-evangelism, pro-Methodism. And a lot of times we jump on this bandwagon, for lack of a better word, and say this person is wrong because of X reason. And does that do more harm than good in the long term? Do we no longer have an opportunity to form an alliance that can help us do something else in the long run because we only see him, her, it in the short term?
Look, labels are never good.
Yeah.
And labels that are not, let me rephrase that. Labels that are not self-claimed are never good.
Yeah.
Right? We saw this tremendously in the '08 election with the debate over, is Obama black? Well, Obama is black because he claims to be black. Yeah. And so when he takes on that self-title, okay, that's different. But you can't give him a title. Well, you can't say, well, he's only this, so he's not really that. Mm-hmm. Right? So I can claim the title of an ally. But that's because I claim that title. That makes it okay. Mm-hmm. If Eddie Fox doesn't claim the title as anti-gay, then there's a nuance in how he feels about it that we're missing.
Right.
Right? And one of the, what I find so interesting is one of the things in kind of LGBTQ culture is the reclaiming of names and the reclaiming of titles. Stephen and I were at a presentation by Reconciling Ministries on Friday.
Blog post. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, you need to write a blog post. So do I. Long story. And one of the things they talked about is the term queer.
Yeah.
That queer used to be an insult. And is often still used that way. And yet they claim that title and redeem that title. Mm-hmm. And so, in a movement that is so concerned with, and in any movement that is so concerned with what we call each other, we need to then, I guess going back to my previous point, we then need to be careful about the names that we use for those we disagree with. Brian, you're nodding pregnantly.
Let me deliver. At least as I look at it, I think the distinction between homophobic and anti-gay is a distinction without difference.
Sure, absolutely.
And so both are equally destructive terms. Sure. And I think the reason that is, maybe it is the case that Reverend Eddie Fox is anti-gay, but nevertheless, we have to be careful with that term. And the reason is that it implies that Eddie Fox would rather these people don't exist. Which also would mean that the Reverend Doctor has kind of collapsed these people's being down to a single quality of their sexuality.
Yeah.
Which I think is similar to the problem of racism, where a person is collapsed all the way down to their race. And so I think that's, to be anti-gay or to be homophobic, that does exist. There are probably anti-gay and homophobic people walking around. And those are people who can't see anyone as any more than their sexuality. And there are probably folks who say things like, God, I wish they'd go back into the closet, and mean it sincerely.
Yeah.
But there are also folks walking around who manage to have functioning relationships with people in spite of a fundamental difference on their views on human sexuality. And the reason that's possible is because, in spite of advocating, celibacy and homosexuality, they still recognize, well, that's my opinion and my conviction. It's more than opinion. It's my conviction, but my conviction doesn't account for everyone's. And there's a lot more to a relationship than just coming to agree on a certain set of predicates. And if that is what there is to a relationship, then that is horrifying. And in fact, a new kind of backhanded kind of colonialism.
But I also just think...
Sees Lavoisier's violence on that.
Yeah, well, I also just think that there's more nuance to the positions than simply for or against. What does it mean to be anti-gay?
Right.
Does that mean, as Brian proposes, that it means that you think they should all go back in the closet? Well, that's not even the position of the United Methodist Church.
No.
We recognize, them in full membership in our churches. We welcome their, participation in the body of Christ. There are very specific instances where we make, to me, troubling stances against their inclusion. But you couldn't say that position is absolutely anti-gay. What it is it's not fully pro-inclusion.
Yeah.
And it may still be flawed. That's not to say that it's vindicatable.
I
it may
find
still
it
be
deeply
flawed,
flawed. Yes.
But reconciliation remains possible
What
with that flaw.
What about if we use the terms pro-inclusion and not pro-inclusion? I mean, I don't know. No, that doesn't work either, because I guess people who hold this position aren't.
We can call ourselves pro-inclusion.
You just can't call anybody else.
Yeah.
I think what must be
So
recognized in the issue is a surprising number of people, it might seem to people who live in the theological academy, a surprising number of people have not yet recognized that someone's sexuality isn't just something they do. It's not just a performative reality. It's part of who they are. It's part of their personhood. And so when someone's sexuality is reduced to something that they do, then it becomes very possible for a person to think, well, I just don't approve of that thing you do. I approve of a number of other things they do. And so those people wouldn't say, well, I'm not anti-gay. I just don't think they should practice their sexuality. So they can say, I love my friend so-and-so. I just wish they'd
I don't
knock that
approve
off.
of their lifestyle choice.
Now,
I love the
I
sinner,
think that's...
but I don't like the sin.
Sure. No, I think it's not an accurate conclusion. I think it takes a faulty philosophical argument to get there. But I think what we have to understand is that's a functioning presupposition, a kind of tacit presupposition a lot of folks are working with. And before we rail them as ethically culpable for it by labeling them something like anti-gay, maybe we first treat them with a little bit of charity as though they were maybe just ignorant.
And I also have to wonder if this is another one of those things that relationships transform. It's really easy to hold that position if you don't spend a lot of time with gay people. I think that there's something about actually having, a relationship, a friendship with someone who's gay that changes very quickly that perception. And I think it's really hard to even have, if we can't get people to talk to each other, we're not going to be able to sit them down and have them really talk to each other. And so I have to wonder if maybe the key to transforming some of this is just spending time together and not at each other.
I think, though, that has to come with the acceptance that maybe we do spend time together. And whenever we spend time together, we hope that that the person changes their mind, but also the acceptance maybe they don't.
Maybe they don't.
I have lots. I was a member of a fraternity with a gay black president, which is quite unusual for Greek life. Usually, it's a bunch of rich white kids. And my fraternity brothers, I had a number who were very conservative Christians, and they all respected and loved our president. There was you couldn't find someone in the chapter who was willing to criticize the fellow, but with the exception of the issue that they thought that the homosexuality was a sin. Now, the way that my brothers seemed to get through it somehow, with much more success, I should say, than my church or any of the campus ministries, the way my brothers got through it is they recognized, well, they're in sales, not in management. That is, they don't assume that when they identify something as a sin, it doesn't necessarily equate for them, and he's going to hell, he's going to burn for it, and it's unforgivable. That's certainly not the case in everyone's. I think it appears to me that Reverend Dr. Fox assumes it's a sin and you go to hell for it. And then maybe in his mind he thinks he's doing some kind of good by saving these people from hell, however wrong-headedly he does it. But at least, once again, when you read a book, you have to do charitable reading. You have to just kind of assume the best of your book before you tear it up. I think we have to extend the same charity to other people.
Yeah.
As loving Christians.
I also think this might be a foot in mouth kind of thing, because when you've been that deeply hurt by a stance and whatever that stands for and how that has affected your life in very real ways and how that works out, I think that, yes, I agree with you, but I also think we can't discount that deep hurt and what that feels like, and not knowing what that feels like and accepting that, that, yeah, I don't know.
I think this is as good a place as any to bring our discussion to a close. These are issues that we will not settle in a night. These are issues that hopefully our church can settle in a lifetime if we all strive, work, and pray hard enough. I want to close in an unusual way with a quote that gets tossed around a lot in Christian circles, particularly in Methodist circles. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and end fear by signing your name. Good night.
Whoa! They're bolding
I like the clever thing you did with the spelling of sin, so it's also Greek soon for together.
Yes.
You're together boldly.
It's also sign your name.
Oh.
I like the
Okay,
I assumed it was Greek.
Cut recording.